and more and still yet more, till we become worthy of union with you. And help us all to hold fast to Baba's Daman till the very end. Avatar Meher Baba ki jai.
Thank you, Baba.
Jai Baba.
నువ్వు ఇవాళ బానే ఉందా వీక్నెస్ లేకుండా రవి
ఈరోజు బాగుంది గీత ఈరోజు బాగుంది జై బాబా సో ప్రవీణ్ గో హెడ్ అందరూ మ్యూట్ చేయండి
Okay, you can see my screen, I guess, right? So,
మ్యూట్ చేసావు ప్రవీణ్ మ్యూట్ చేసావు నువ్వు
can you hear me now?
We cannot see your PowerPoint yet if you have.
Oh, mute chesana. Then I'm
yeah, you're unmuted now. Okay, you're fine now.
You can see my PowerPoint now?
I can't see your PowerPoint. You have to choose the window.
Oh, yeah.
We can see you.
I did share.
Share screen, Jesse. You have to click on that PowerPoint presentation.
Start sharing. You can see my screen, right?
Starting, I
See
think.
your screen. Now you have to choose the.
You can see my screen now?
We can see your screen, but we cannot see your PowerPoint yet.
Oh, no.
So there are multiple screens in that, Praveen?
Oh, no, multiple screens.
Then you have to share that other screen, maybe.
Share.
Bro, share screen ragane.
Sharing. Okay.
Oh,
better?
Yeah, I put. Yes.
Good.
Now we can see the screen. Jai Baba.
Jai Baba. You can see full screen, kada? Okay. You can hear me, kada, Mike?
Yes, Praveen, you can hear you.
Okay.
Jai Baba.
Jai Baba. So, I'll just go through the first chapter very, very quickly, just for continuity. And then we will come down to the second chapter, and then I'll spend about 10 minutes on the second chapter. Okay. Conditions of happiness, the overcoming of suffering through detachment. So Baba talks about detachment and suffering and how we can overcome suffering through detachment. And then all of us know that the definition of happiness, and everyone seeks happiness. But basically everyone seems like they are immersed in suffering, because the way in which we seek happiness is through desires. The desires are for wealth, power, worldly success and fame, and knowledge. So it's basically your attainment of these desires. So fulfillment of these desires will cause us happiness. But then the non-fulfillment of these desires will cause us unhappiness and suffering. The one thing that I have also learned reading through this whole chapter is, when we hear Baba talk about happiness and suffering, I always interpreted happiness as jubilant. That is happiness. Or suffering is like extreme suffering. But then while I was reading this chapter, I realized suffering can come in small doses and happiness too. Right? So we basically should relate the small amounts of happiness that we get on a daily basis along with the small amounts of suffering that we all get on a daily basis. Right? So when we look at this desires, they are the cause for all of our sufferings. Okay? The understanding, basically, if we understand the cause of these suffering, we will better understand happiness and how to attain happiness. So desires, cannot lead to abiding happiness, right? So we all know that. More desires, more the suffering. The fulfillment of these desires will cause momentary happiness, and then these desires won't die. They come back. The fulfillment of these desires will not end with its termination, but they'll come back with extra intensity. So that's basically the desires and suffering, the relation between them. Now, Baba also talks about detachment. Sometimes intense suffering can cause us temporary detachment from the worldly life. The detachment is often set aside by new desires, right, over a period of time. And Baba talks about this example of a man who watches a play of King Gopichanda. He gets motivated by it. He turns into a Bairagi, shaves his head, dresses like one, and then he meditates, goes, sits under a tree. Then he'll start feeling hungry over a period of time. And his wife is looking for him, and then she finds him, cleans him, brings him back, dresses him, and then now he's feeling happy and starts leading a normal life. So it's basically he went through a temporary detachment, and then he came back into the normal life of desires. Baba also talks about vairagya, the types of detachment that you would have. Smashan vairagya is a vairagya where we experience a cremation. When we witness a cremation, we basically say all this life is for nothing, and we temporarily detach from our worldly life, all the desires. But then these are short-lived, and we'll go back to those desires. Then the next one is the Tivra Vairagya, which is caused by your loss of a loved one. So when we lose a loved one or extreme suffering that is being caused, it causes us to change our lifestyle, and it basically makes us detached from our desires. But then again, over a period of time, we go back to our desires. Baba says there is spiritual value for this Tivra Vairagya. There is definitely value for that. But it is not born out of understanding. The most important in the final Vairagya or detachment that Baba talks about is Purna Vairagya, where it comes from real understanding. It comes from knowledge. It comes from making our mind free of our desires. Right? It comes through true understanding of suffering, and its causes. Like the desirelessness makes a man like a rock, and we talk about Sthita Prajna, where we talk about the person who takes praise and blame, happiness and sadness in the same vein. So that's basically where we need to go to, is that's only attained by self-knowledge. Okay? Baba also talks about suffering, physical and mental, and the importance of mental. The mental suffering is much more intense than the physical suffering. Sometimes physical suffering can help reduce mental suffering. Right? So the final thing that Baba talks about is, happiness through desirelessness in the first chapter, where it is desirelessness is latent in everyone, but the complete detachment where you want nothing is a place to go, and a path to eternal and unfading happiness. Right? Basically, that can only be achieved through self-knowledge and self-realization. Okay. Now let's go into chapter 2, where Baba now talks about contentment. He picks up on the previous chapter and talks a little bit about contentment. We all know suffering is self-created through desires. And desirelessness frees one from suffering. We understand that part. Life becomes very simple for all of us if we are having no desires. And the complexities of our life will be completely gone. It becomes much more simple for us. But how do we achieve this desirelessness, renunciation of these desires? Right? So how do we get to renouncing these desires? That basically is a process for all of us, right? So the suffering, when we all of us suffer, it purges our mind of its many desires, right? Purges the soul of its desires. And when the soul is going through this suffering, it actually is going in the counter direction of the mind. For example, if we all are suffering, okay, it purges our mind of our desires. For example, I thought of an example where Akka gave an example of her sari with her co-sister-in-law, I think her sister, Sri Ramalu, their wife, where she went into a sari shop and she had an eye on one of the saris, and that is a desire, right, to get that sari. But then Sri Ramalu, their wife, she wanted that sari. She picked up the sari. And the experience that Akka went, that it is counter, the mind is saying, the ego mind is saying, I want it. And the soul is saying, let go. And there is a friction between the soul and the mind right there. And Akka gave in and saying, let the soul win there in that case. So that's basically the constant struggle that all of us have when we actually renounce these desires, right? In small ways every day. Okay. This suffering also is very useful. It actually liberates our soul from the bondages, right? Bondages, and leads to eternal happiness. And that is basically when a patient, Baba gives an example where when a patient needs to be cured, he needs to go into surgery, and it causes a little bit more pain, but finally it is actually for the benefit of the patient, right? What is the true nature of suffering? We all need to go through this path of suffering to understand its true nature. We all need to have, I think Baba is intending that we all have desires, and we experience that the suffering that is caused by these desires, and that suffering actually has some spiritual value. So we actually complicate our lives with these imaginary desires. It's artificial and imaginary. It's always like, if this happens, then that happens. And we all build these desires in our mind, right? And these desires are a very essential part of the limited self. The limited self is like a quote Baba explains. The limited self is like you have a pure soul, but then you have a coat around it. And that is surrounded by the ego mind. And that is, Baba, what it is called as the limited self. You're limiting your soul, the limited soul, limited self of a man. Okay. So we need to denounce these desires to make it much more simple. Okay. But denouncing these desires and attaining the freedom from these desires and being happy is not an easy path. It's very difficult. So people need to understand, we all need to understand the true nature of these desires by experiencing the suffering it causes, right? So the suffering is sometimes caused by, we apply for a job, we don't get the job. We look for a promotion, we don't get a promotion. Or For example, Pawan gave an example of the deal that he was looking forward to happen did not happen. These are all small doses of suffering that because we desired for something else to happen our way, it does not happen, then that is causing us some unhappiness and suffering. But this desire, the suffering that is caused is also can be also looked as a medicine for the soul. It is essential for a soul to go through the suffering to in the spiritual journey. Happiness is pursued in a selfish way most of the time for all of us, right? So we basically are looking for happiness for ourselves. And then because we are looking for happiness within ourselves, we also cause pain for other people during that pursuit, right? So that is the selfish motto of man when he tries to achieve this happiness. And and during that process of attaining your happiness selfishly, you basically inflict others pain and unhappiness. Baba says that this mere, the happiness can be achieved through self-forgetful love. Okay? So what we talk about is desirelessness can eliminate suffering for oneself and also for others if we stop being selfish. Okay? So we become desireless. We can impart happiness to ourselves and also to others. But Baba also talks about the mere being desireless will not get you to true happiness. Just being mere desire. So that's, I think, one of the examples last time Chantimai gave is becoming a Bairagi. That is an example, right? You go out, you leave everything, and then you go out. That becomes you've given up everything, all your desires, right? And you go out. That does not, Baba says, that does not give you true happiness. Okay? It does protect us, it protects us from self-creating suffering, basically self-inflicted suffering. It protects us from that. It goes also a long way towards attaining true happiness, but it cannot by itself attain true happiness. True happiness is what we all should be looking for. And true happiness begins when one learns how to be forgetful of yourself and love towards others. Baba kind of talked about one word which was an interesting concept, but I think I would like to get more details about that. But Baba calls this as an art, the right adjustment to other people. So he calls the art of right adjustment to other people is through self-forgetfulness and through love. That is the only way you can achieve true happiness. So, one second here. Yep. The domain of pure love. Pure love is rare. Right? In most cases, love becomes adulterated, so it becomes more selfish. Right? So even the love for the beloved. So you want only the beloved to be with you. Okay. For example, a man sees his son in poor clothes and he feels very much in love that he needs to provide better clothes to his son. That is selfish love. That becomes pure love if he looks at another kid, not his son, and has the same feelings that he has to provide the same to the stranger's son too, then that becomes pure love. Providing it to you, only your son, that becomes selfish love. Okay? This domain, this pure love, it cannot be forced onto someone. Okay? And it has to manifest from within ourselves. Okay? Selfishness is inherent in all of us. It's very easy. It comes with our minds. The mind is selfish, right? But we need to make a decision to step out of our limited self. The limited self is a covering around the soul with the ego mind. We need to try and come out of that limited self, and that happens only by the will of the aspirant for true love. Meaning, it is that will of the aspirant, meaning all of us, need to have the will, or we need to make a conscious decision that we want to come out of our limited self. Only then you will be able to attain pure happiness. Okay? And it can only be developed when we have an intense longing for that pure love. Right? And it needs to come with a firm determination from us within to achieve that selflessness. Okay? True love is awakened only by the master. That is a very important concept. So what we are talking about is, we talked about the limited self. That is how we are. We are limited by our ego mind. We have the soul within, that we have a covering around it with our ego mind. Now, what we as an aspirant needs to have is the determination or the will, or we want to look forward to attain pure love. But just by our will of looking forward to pure love is not enough. It needs to be it can only be awakened by the master. So it needs to have the grace of the master for us to be able to come out of our limited self and attain pure happiness. That basically comes with our intense longing for our pure love. The master then guides us, the aspirant, into a state of divine love. And love is the most significant thing all of us know in life. And this love cannot be awakened except by coming in contact with the incarnation of love. So God is love personified. It's the incarnation of love. So for us to be able to experience that love, we need to get in contact with that incarnation of love. And when having this love, experiencing this and practicing this is actually awakened in the aspirant that leads to God realization. Okay? So this God realization, when someone attains God realization, it causes us to have unfading happiness. It's self-sustained. It's eternally fresh. It's unbound, unfading. It's boundless, and it's indescribable. So that's basically what we need to all look forward for, is that God realization. Baba says that when one becomes God, everything else is zero. And this is very, very interesting statement, that it is for this happiness that the world has sprung into existence. I need to understand this very in more detail, but this is a statement that Baba gives. that this happiness of God realization, caused by God realization, is everyone is in pursuit of this happiness and to be getting God realization. And for this happiness is why the world has sprung into existence. Okay? I think that's pretty much covers the chapters. Jai Baba.